start with me in Romans chapter 1. Let's just visit again an extremely well-known passage, but one which is critical to our consideration this afternoon. Romans chapter 1 in verse 19, because that which may be known of God is manifest or openly revealed in them. For God has showed it unto them, for the invisible things of him. So God's qualities, God's brilliance, God's wonderful design, the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that men are without excuse. And God laments the fact that even in the Roman world and the Greek world of old, when they knew God, when people had every evidence from the rain and the sunshine and the seasons that came to them, from the blessings of the earth they received, had every reason to look to God. They glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of God, the incorruptible God, to an image made like to corruptible things, and to birds and beasts, and etc. And men had fish gods and sun gods and all kinds of gods, golden calves. And God really resented the fact that men would not turn to him as they should. In the modern age, when men have education and science behind them, they do the same thing. Professing themselves to be wise, they become fools. And they say that the creation itself could do the creating, that the things that were there could actually replicate and improve themselves to a higher status, a higher species. And again, people fail to see the great and wonderful wisdom of God in the things which have been made. And today's session is going to be very easy on your brains. We've had some pretty hard and long sessions that we've gone through. This is just a simple reminder of why we believe in the Creator, and not much more than that. So we're going to go through it pretty quickly. Why we believe in God, the brilliant and wise Creator. Just to reinforce things that I'm sure you already know, but just so that we don't miss out on what is essential. Now, we live in a universe. Any human being, it says there, the things which are clearly seen. What is clearly seen? Well, we can actually see a lot more than the Greeks and Romans could, because we do have science telling us how things work. The universe has laws and orders. They are astounded. We've quoted before how finely balanced the universe is, the forces that pull in opposite directions that keep the universe together, and how incredibly complex that is, and how much of a margin of error there isn't. And our Earth being placed in such a position with all the conditions upon it, with 122 unique factors that make life possible to exist on this planet. And it's a lot of factors. But the scientists have actually added up the list. There's 122 things that are regarded now as essential to life existing on this Earth. The array of intelligent and incredibly intricate life. The very fact that we humans have incredibly developed minds with a moral capacity, which the animals don't have. And we have the Bible. So we actually have the Creator's instructions. The Maker's instructions are given to us. I made the world, and here's why I did it. Here's how it works. Here's how you work with it. God has given us the Maker's instructions as well. So we have a purpose and a reason for the creation. So we've got everything we need to really understand what God wants us to appreciate. So any person facing the undeniable facts of the fact that we are here in a unique universe and a unique planet can only say one of two things. You can either say God made it by miraculous power in a way far beyond our comprehension, and he has a plan to fill it with his glory. Or you can go to the atheism line, everything came to be from nothing by random chance with no purpose at all. And that's the stark choice you're faced with. And in between we have our TE brethren who try and say, well, we want the evolution model and to fit it in with the God who created. We've already looked at those statements, but this is our paradigm. He that cometh to God must believe that he is. And we start from that premise that we do believe God is. And we're going to try and reinforce why we believe God is there, because of the things he has made. And God makes that opening statement, he created the heavens and the earth. And it was an amazing thing when they got the satellite up, or the men up in space, and they could look back at the earth and see it there hanging in space as God said it did. God created the heaven, God formed the earth, he made it, he created it not in vain, he created it to be inhabited. And simply as that, this is a planet that is absolutely perfectly designed for the sustenance of living things. You've got an atmosphere. Very few planets have any atmosphere at all. You have a terrific balance of gravity on our planet, which is just right for the things we need to do. You have the water cycle, which is a fabulous water cycle mentioned in the book of Job in great details. You have the oceans and the ocean currents. You have the actual axis of the earth being tilted to make life possible. So many things. Outside of that, what have you got? Well, you've got evolution, which is unproven, unscientific, a very vain attempt to take God out of the picture. No reason for it, just total reliance on purposeless, directionless chance. So it's not much of a choice really, is it, to actually say, well, I'm going to have faith in God because there's some meaning at the end of it, or to believe in evolution where there's no purpose and no reason for it. Evolution, why is it popular? Well, we've already discussed this. Academic organisations are funded by secular governments, and therefore you have to line up to be funded or employed. Scientists are obliged to support the generally accepted but godless ideas to get funded. Men don't want to face up to a creator God. But look at that last statement. Because unproven theories are constantly published as fact, they get a status far greater than they really deserve. So we need to understand that. But a lot of people believe in evolution because they've been told that intelligent people believe in evolution. And we need just to be aware of that fact, that so many people in this world have swallowed evolution because they think smarter people than them believe in evolution. Okay, let's get back to the evidence to believe in God. The perfection of conditions for life on this earth, the brilliant complex DNA, which we'll look at in a moment, the magnificence of the creation, the inbuilt instincts of animals, and all of that indicates a creative intelligence, the wisdom of complementary created things and their programmabilities to relate, and the person and the teaching and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. You know, there is circumstantial evidence. There's lots of reasons to actually believe in a God and in our Lord Jesus Christ and his resurrection. The earth created for life. The 122 factors, you only had to vary one of them by just a margin of less than 1%, and life would cease to exist eventually upon this planet. So they have all these factors that all have to be there at the same time in the same balance. You know, the ozone layer. What did we do to the ozone layer? We bombarded it with CFCs, and it started to thin out. There was a time about 10 years ago when you went to the South Island of New Zealand, and on a day that was less than 20 degrees, you would get absolutely burnt, because the ozone hole appeared over the South Island of New Zealand and over Antarctica. Probably didn't bother you guys. You were pumping the CFC up and we were getting scorched. But, you know, it just showed there was a hole in it. So what did the world do? At last the world did something united way. They banned CFCs worldwide. And the ozone layer has restored itself. But if we had gone on pumping CFCs, that hole would have got bigger and bigger over the planet. It just shows you how fragile it is and how just pumping out refrigeration gas started to affect our planet. So it's just an example of how fragile the planet is, but how beautifully balanced it is at the same time. The Earth is exactly the right distance from the sun. The Earth has an ozone layer that protects us from the sun's harmful rays. If the Earth were 10% larger or smaller, life couldn't exist, because all the existing things around it would not fit and then wouldn't actually work. The size would actually be wrong. We have oxygen and water not found on any other planet. The moon is exactly located to make the tides work at the right times, and the tilted axis makes the seasons possible. And you can just see this is an incredibly beautifully designed planet that we live on. It has a precise magnetic field, the relative size of the sun and the earth. So if the sun or the earth were bigger than each other, when they would actually have a different bearing on each other. And then you've got the combination of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen and their compounds that exist together on the earth today. This is from Lawrence Henderson, a noted biologist. There is in truth not one chance in countless millions of millions that the many unique properties of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen, and especially their stable compounds, water and carbonic acid, which chiefly make up the Earth's atmosphere, it's not one chance that they should simultaneously occur in the three elements. There must be a law that connects them. These are no mere accidents. So, a biologist looks at the creation and says, look, this is just so incredible. It's just unbelievably that this should all happen together at the same time in the same place, and that they should be so beautifully balanced to create the water cycle that we need. Stephen Hawking. The odds against a universe like ours emerging out of something like the Big Bang are enormous. I think clearly there are religious implications wherever you start to discuss the origins of the universe. There must be religious overtones. But I think most scientists prefer to shy away from the religious implications. And, here's a man who's regarded as the world's most respected physicist who says, well, really you've got to go in the direction of religion because it's just all too amazingly impossible for it to happen by chance. And, there's a man that's prepared to say it. You've got to get religious. Now, not that he's greatly religious, but he says it's the best avenue to look in. So it takes more blind faith to believe in spontaneous evolution than to believe in an intelligent creator. We've looked at the Paley principle. We'll go past that one. Okay, let's go on to a few examples of God. God made a challenge. Have you entered the treasure of the snow? Have you seen the treasures of the hail? You know this one very well. That was written in the book of Job. Job was experienced. Job's conversation with God occurred way back in the time of Abraham, around about then, when Israel were in Egypt, possibly. So you're talking, way back 3,000, BC, or 3,000 years ago from where we are today. Did anybody ever understand that until they got a microscope out? Well, we know what they saw, don't we? You put snowflakes under the microscope and you see incredibly, beautifully coordinated and always symmetrical, six-sided, or based on six-sided figures. So everything's based on the number 6, and they're incredibly symmetrical, and they've never found two the same. So you can go through the snowflakes, and they're all different, but they're all based on six-sided shapes. So quite amazing, isn't it? Just to go back through those, getting ahead of ourselves, but you go through it's just the beautiful shapes. Some of these are just incredible with the thing, but that's a whole bunch of little six-sided shapes on that one, and it's just almost unbelievable that it wasn't designed. And God said that 3,000 years ago. Have you seen the treasures of the snow? Job, you haven't seen it, have you? I have, because says God. I know what's there. And our modern scientists have helped us to find that with the microscopes that we now have. So God said this, in the book of Job, ask now the beasts, and they shall teach you, and the fowls of the air, and they shall tell thee. Speak to the earth, it shall teach thee, and the fishes of the sea shall declare it unto thee. Who knoweth not all those things that the hand of Yahweh hath wrought this? So the Bible's advice is, look at the animals, look at the birds. Well, let's look at a couple. Geckos, how do they walk anywhere? They can go up sideways up a wall, they can walk on glass, upside down on glass. How do they do it? Well, again, microscopes, actually, they've got huge microscopes now, actually tell us how it's done. Now, God said this, there are 4 things that live upon the earth, they're exceeding wise. The spider, it should actually be the gecko, because the poor old English had never seen geckos when they translated in 1611, so they put in spiders. But it's actually the gecko taketh hold with her hands and is in the king's palaces. So a king builds a beautiful palace and all of a sudden looks up and there's a gecko sitting up above him on the roof, and probably to drop on his head at some stage. And how do they get up there? How can they go up the walls and across the ceiling? Well, they've actually looked at this very, very finely. So the secret we now understand. It's only possible to see with modern technology. They have millions of microscopic hairs on their feet, so small that they can attach themselves to the molecules of the surface, even of glass. So the little things on their feet are so small they'll go in between the particles or the molecules that make up the surface of glass. Now that's incredible when you think about it. Each microscopic hair splits, exposing up to 1 billion tiny spatulae to act like an adhesive. So their feet look, if you look at them under a microscope, they look like they're all hairy feet. But each hair has got 1 billion little parts to it. So I'm just going to show you this. Now, bear in mind, this is going down, all right? So there's the foot. So we take from the foot, I'll just put the pointer on. We take from the foot a little section of the foot. So you see these rows of hairs. So we take from a row of a hair, we go up here, we look at what that row, then we go from the hair and we go down here and we see these little things on the end. And we go, so we're down to 100 here. And then from these, we've got these little tiny spatulas, this little tiny little hook thing. And there's 1 billion on each hair. So, we're getting down where it's incredibly impossible for us to see it. So that's how fine the gecko's feet is. And God knew this. He says the gecko can walk across the ceiling. You can't understand that. I can. And this is a photograph getting right down to the millions of contact pads. And each one of those is made up of little hairy things as well. And it just keeps going down and down in size. And yet it works. And so the gecko, now this is amazing. A gecko can support itself entirely on one toe. So you can put one toe on the roof and hang off one toe. One hair alone could take the weight of an ant. So just one little hair hooked in can actually hold an ant up. If you could engage all the hairs of a gecko at one time, so put his 4 feet up and get them properly engaged, you could hang a man off him. Probably the gecko might break in the middle, but the feet wouldn't give away. All right? So it's just amazing when you think about it, the adhesive power of that gecko. Now, God knew about that. And that's the important thing, yeah.
And does the US military grants try to replicate that?
Yeah.
Using nanotechnology, and they still haven't been able to do it.
They can't do it.
Just trying to replicate
Yeah.
the feet of a gecko.
Yeah. Although someone did say this is how they invented Velcro, by trying to work it out, the similar principle for Velcro. So, okay, so that's just a little example, just to do it. I'm going to give you another one you might not be aware of, the Japanese honeybee. Now, when the Europeans went across and they eventually started to trade with Japan, they found that there was a totally different strain of bees, and the Japanese had their own bees they'd had for centuries. And the Europeans said, look, we've got better bees than that, we'll bring them over here to Japan and you can have a better strain of bees. Problem was, there was a wasp in Japan that ate all the European bees. And this is the Japanese hornet. And all the imported bees that came to Japan got gobbled up by the hornets. And so they said, well, look, this is a bit odd, that the hornet just goes in and he's so much bigger than the bees, he just kills all the guard bees and he goes in and eats the larvae and he just wipes out the whole hive. So why did the Japanese bees not get eaten out by this guy? So the Europeans were quite amazed about the Japanese bee. What have they got? Well, the European bees, their defence is they send out guards and they sting and they'll fight and take you on. So they watch what the Japanese bees do, and the Japanese bees don't do that. Now, this is the instinct that God gave to them. When the hornet turns up, they don't bite him, they don't sting him, they just surround him. So they jump all over him. They don't sting, they jump on the hornet and totally enclose him in a mass of bees. Then they vibrate their bodies over about 15 minutes to create heat up to 47 degrees. At 45 degrees, the hornet dies. But they can survive to 48 degrees. So they all just get there, just get around him so he can't move, and they just all vibrate until they cook him. And when he's dead, they said, right, sure, we've got 1 degree to spare, we can back off now, and we're okay. And how do they work it out? I mean, how do they work out how to do that? And of course, the imported bees never ever got to evolve the defence. They just got wiped out time after time. And having failed, there's no chance of evolving. So, this is incredible wisdom that God's put into the honeybee. And there's a photograph of, the Japanese bee suffocating an invading hornet. They just heat him up until he dies. And God says, who has put wisdom in the inward parts? In that case, that hornet and those bees live in the same territory, and the bees have the required defence to protect themselves from annihilation. And, the hornets soon learn not to take on too many beehives. So it's just an amazing example of the wisdom in the inward parts that God said. Go to the animals and ask them. Just a bit of a comedy on that. Well, how would the evolutionists look at us? Well, the evolutionists said, it's a bee, yes, it makes honey, it builds hives, it flies, it's amazing. This bee evolves through mindless, unguided processes. I can't investigate any other possibility, whereas the creationists can look at it and say it testifies to the beauty and the wonder of the Creator. God said this, who hath put wisdom in the inward parts? Things like inborn instincts in animals. I mean, you've got these salmon. I saw some salmon swimming in the creek up here, or the river the other day. How do they know? You know, they go off for years into the ocean and they come back, years later, and find exactly the same stream. I mean, who put that into their brains? To be able to locate that same stream that they come back to. Working with other plants and creatures, we talked about that animals and plants work together, different animals work together. Camouflage, we'll show you some of that in a moment. Migratory knowledge, birds, how do they know that they've got enough food to fly from here to here? And how do they know where they go back to the place where their parents were, generations before? Homing instincts, pigeons that can work out, you can take them with you in Australia, they put them on a train, send them up to Darwin, which is about 3,000 mile away, let them out, and they go up, fly straight back to their home box. And how do they work it out? You can do anything and send them any direction you like, they'll always come home. They've got a homing instinct. Senses of smell and hearing. There are moths that can actually find their partner from 5 miles away. And the actual amount of scent being put out, you can't even hardly measure it. And yet that moth can pick it up. And of course, we know the sense of smell in some animals and so forth. Foreknowledge of weather. The dogs know when the storm's coming. They start getting jittery when there's lightning on the way. Animals know when to hibernate. In Australia, we have the ants. When they know rain is coming, they build covers over their nests and so forth. Radiolocation with bats and other things like that. What do you see? Hey? A what? Yeah. There he is, that's his head. See, that's his head over there. With the eye. The eye is even coloured, so you can't see it. And that's the chameleon there. Pretty good camouflage, isn't it? And that's what God does. Able to blend in with its surroundings, it changes its colour to match. So whatever leaf it's standing on, it can actually say, look, I want to look like this tree. So somehow, in its body, it knows that I can actually paint myself the colour of the tree I'm sitting in. Pretty good. Even its eyes are hidden. Evolution can't explain how such a creature is capable of hiding itself by changing its colour to match the leaves, except to say that many must have evolved, and this one was the fittest and so survived. You can imagine all the others that couldn't actually work out how to change their colour, they didn't survive. But it's just an amazing example of camouflage. Well, fearfully and wonderfully made we are, the human eye. When we look at the human eye, it's an incredible thing. The Bible says this, the hearing ear and the seeing eye, Yahweh hath made even both of them. And, there's a very simple description of an eye with the various parts that you need, but that's only a very few of them. When you get further down, there's actually lots and lots of parts to the eye that make it up, and it is an incredibly complex thing. And an evolutionist has got to say that this just all fell together by chance. So you've got the tear ducts, and you've got the cornea, you've got the lens, you've got the transmission, so that the upside down image that hits the lens is reversed by the time it hits your brain. And you've got all these different layers of things that actually do their own job of reflection and so forth. And it's an amazing, amazing thing with all the muscles that go around it. Look at the human eye. Evolutionists, this eye is functionally flawed because they say that, that the eye has actually got an inbuilt stigmatism. So that there's actually a thing there that we don't always correctly focus as quickly as we should. The evolutionist says, there's something. What an idiotic design. I can conclude that no one created it, it came from nothing. So the evolutionist says, if I can find that I don't think it's perfect, then obviously it's still evolving, or it's not something that an intelligent designer made. So let's look at the eye. When we're conceived, 1 million optic nerves start to grow outward from the eye and the brain. So when that fertilised cell starts to divide up, the part where the eye has and the part where the brain is going to be, they start to grow. 1 million nerves start to grow, and they have to find each other and join the right one of their partner. So they're like fibre optic cable, and they grow through the flesh as the baby is growing to find each other. and they have to find the precise counterpart so the eye can function. Now this is something, and you're looking at something in this big, the time a child is first conceived, and that's when the optic nerves are growing, at 1 million of them growing towards each other. So we're talking absolutely microscopic. The eye can adjust at phenomenal speed to light variations, spherical and chromatic aberration, distance and movement. And you know that you can be looking at something in the distance and you turn around and you can focus here. And the eye's adjusted to that focal length. And, your eyes adjust to the dark and all these other things we adjust to. And it has an incredible ability to adjust itself. If you've got a projector, you've got to come up and you've got to quickly turn the lens, or anything else we use, like binoculars, you've got to adjust them to the length. The eye can adjust to any number of situations in a very, very short space of time. So more facts about your eyes. The eyes have 2 million working parts, 8 million cone cells to detect colour, 20 million rod cells to detect contrasts. You can actually work out 500 different shades of grey. So if we lined up 500 shades of grey around here, you could actually see the difference between them. And you could say this one's not the same as the next one. We blink 4.2 million times a year, because most of the time your eye blinks so fast you don't even know it's happening. But your eye is actually cleansing itself and lubricating itself all the time. Eyes don't need to rest. Amazing. The only muscle in the body that doesn't need rest is our eyes. So theoretically you could keep your eyes open forever and they wouldn't ever get tired. Eye muscles are the strongest body for their size. They're 100 times more strong than they seem to need to be. So they're amazing muscles around the eyes. The lens changes shapes for different distances. The pupils delate for light intensity. So they are they can vary themselves enormously as they go along. But look at all the different types of eyes God's created. There's not just one model here. You can have eyes that are on owls and, the seal and the porpoise and, goats. They're all different eyes. And some of them have different mechanisms. It says in Psalm 94, "Understand, O dullest of the people, fools, when will you be wise? He who planted the ear, does he not hear? He who formed the eye, does he not see?" And people tend to ignore God, and yet God can make all these different eyes work and work for the creature for whom they are placed on. Life shows the existence and the plan of God. Every faculty proves the purpose of its existence. What of the human mind? Think about the human mind as different to the animal mind. Now we know the principle from Genesis 1, the likeness of God, the mental and moral capacity we have to think like God. But you think about it. We can have love and we can have spiritual thoughts. We can pass on our wisdom to future generations. We can reason, think and believe in future things. An animal's future really amounts to finding a mate and finding a meal. And beyond that, there's not much else they think about in the future. So, but we can believe in a future hope. We can believe in a future life. We can experience pride and show gratitude. We can discern right from wrong. We have morals and values. And we have the ability to worship a God we do not see. And it just shows that all the faculties that we have in this human mind, that we are the top of the creation, not because we're smarter than the animals, but because God has made us like himself. And we should have dominion, therefore, over the things of the flesh. So God's challenge, we saw that before, but just remember that. God says, the very fact of the things I have made means you can ask me about things to come. So if we've got the brains to look at the creation and say, there is the testimony to the fact that there is a brilliant creator out there, we can go to God with confidence and say, tell us what the future holds. And we can have faith in that because God who made the earth guarantees that that will come to pass also. So how did life come? Well, Darwin can't explain it. Science can only suggest spontaneous generation, and evolution offers no examples at all. So there's lots of reasons for us to believe in God. I'm probably going to cut it there. DNA. We'll just come to DNA briefly and just mention that. One of the most greatest things in recent times to actually back up the existence of God has been the discoveries of DNA. And we've got a DVD tonight that will go into this in much greater depth. But Watson and Crick back in 1954 first discovered DNA, and we've had 50 to 60 years of work on DNA, and they are still learning more and more about DNA all the time. Human DNA has 30,000 genes in a 0.005 millimetre diameter sphere, so you try and think of something that's 0.005 in diameter, and you've got 30,000 genes inside of that. It was expected to seal the argument for evolution, but it did just the opposite. In fact, this is why so many noted scientists now have become believers in design, because DNA actually didn't give them the answer they want for evolution, it gave them the opposite. So how did it come? Well, God said everything after its kind, and now we have the proof that God actually programs DNA. And this remarkable chain of atoms that God put together regulates life. And look at that. And the Bible said in Psalm 139, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And the word there, wonderfully made, is in the Hebrew, woven together. We are woven together. And they find this thing that looks like a bit of tapestry. Every one of you has enough DNA that if we actually could get it out of you and stretch it out so all of those colours were in line, in a straight line like a straight of beads, it would go once around the earth. One person's DNA. So that's how long the strands are when you actually put them out end on end like that.
You know when it says, you knit me together.
That's where it says, we're knit together, fearfully and wonderfully made. It's the same word as we're knit together in my mother's womb, yeah. So it has the idea of being knit together, and it has this sort of woven together, which was based on the cherubim, which was all those things were blended together in the cherubic veil. But when they see it, it looks like a tapestry, doesn't it? And they've now discovered how beautiful DNA is. I'm going to leave it till tonight because in the DVD we're going to watch, you'll see the presentation of DNA, which is much better than I could do.